Joining us for analysis is Michael Maloof. He's a former senior strategic analyst at the Pentagon. Michael, great having you first. And second, could you give us a bigger picture analysis of what happened?
Yeah, I think they both came in, both leaders came into the meeting yesterday at in the Oval Office with two different agendas. Trump, of course, wanted a minerals deal, and Zelenskyy came in really wanting more of a security guarantee, meaning boots on the ground, military backing, pretty much what he's gotten from Europe, particularly the French and the British. Trump's view is that that was premature, that to get into that discussion, that by having this deal, as he calls it, with American companies involved in the exploitation of resources that would benefit both Ukraine and the United States as a payback or a partial payback, if possible, for all the aid that the U.S. has given to date, something like $350 billion. It would have been somewhat of a guarantee against any future hostilities. You got to keep in mind that, you know, back during the Clinton administration, when Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, Russia and the United States, England and France, they all guaranteed security for Ukraine, and we saw what happened, particularly given what both sides are claiming. The reality is that Trump sees Ukraine just as a cog in the wheel. He has a far greater geostrategic vision in trying to normalize relations with an equal strategic partner, namely Russia, which has more nuclear weapons than the United States. It also has probably at this point, aside from China, the strongest ground military in the world. It's also got the nuclear capability plus hypersonics. So it's got an edge, a military edge, and the United States military has basically dwindled in time, and it's going to be costing a lot more. And given the amount of effort now the United States is trying to undertake to trim down the debt that the United States has, which is approaching $37 trillion, he sees this continuation of war and payment out there as a form of not resolving anything. He wants peace, and he made that very, very clear. The British and the French, on the other hand, want to put troops in there and keep a presence. Trump is basically saying the U.S. Position will be out of doing any of that because of their strategic interest in working more closely with Russia over time on
yes.
joint projects and what have you.
Yes, Michael, and I want to go deeper into this because Zelensky's trip to London, is it damage control or is it security guarantees?
Well, he's trying to seek reaffirmation. It's clear that the Europeans are backing him. The Brits certainly are promising that. They basically set up Zelenskyy for what happened by encouraging him to push more for ground security, namely U.S. troops on the ground. They attempted it, but they knew better because they're more seasoned politicians not to do that with Donald Trump because they knew what his answer would be. So they basically walked around that. But you can hear their closing statements when they met with the president, and even now wanting to put in troops into Ukraine, that they want to continue the fight. And the EU just recently sought to approve $200 billion in military assistance for Ukraine, using what they believe is the assets from using the interest from the frozen Russian assets. And that just prolongs things. And so the United States doesn't want to deal with that. The United States has other priorities.
And recently tomorrow there will be a summit in London with EU leaders. And you just brought up the EU, and there's a rift there, right? Because Baltic states, with a huge stake at play here, were not invited to that European Leaders Security Summit. How do you see that? Well,
they're not a major player. They're just not a major player. I think this is more for a reaffirmation of the major European powers. They're looking more toward trying to create their own European defense systems. I think that once Russia and the United States can come to a strategic arrangement, you're going to probably see this as the beginning of the end of NATO as we now know it, with 32 members. I think it's the beginning of the end of NATO because Trump's view on NATO is quite jaundiced at this point. And we also see there's a lot of fractures within NATO itself, even among the European countries, Hungary and all the others. So, and even in the EU, they don't have the military and the economic capability to sustain a war against Russia. That's the bottom line, and that's the message Trump has been trying to get across to the Europeans. But Zelenskyy still has notions that he's going to regain all of his territories back, and that's just not reality. So I think that their meeting is basically going to be a reaffirmation of support for Zelenskyy. It gives him a feeling of comfort, but he ultimately is going to have to come back to the United States to try to reconcile, unless Europe decides to just take the ball and run with it, and that's a possibility. But they're going to lose ultimately because up until now, Ukraine has been sustained primarily because of U.S. assistance, which has been double that of what Europe has provided in military assistance.
Michael Maloof, thank you. Great having you.